Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we are going to present the FY23 Superintendent's Budget Requests. So to start, obviously we have given out the booklet and you've had time to peruse it and get your questions ready, which we can try to answer tonight. And if we can't answer them tonight, we'll be happy to answer them at the next school committee meeting or sooner than that if we can get the answer out to you. And we're going to start with a PowerPoint that's going to go over the major cost centers, areas, and requests for the FY23 budget. And then, Mr. Mayor, we're going to hand it back to the school committee, and it becomes their budget, and they can ask any questions. And I've asked the leadership team to be here tonight in case there's anything that we can't answer. We're going to phone a friend. We're going to bring them up to the committee chair, and we'll have them come and help us with the answers.
Is that going to be unlimited, or are you only allowed 2 call a friend?
That's up to you, Mr. Mayor, and the vice chair, I think. Whoop. Might want to turn off mics that are not being used so we don't get that feedback. So I'm going to have Doug start to go through the PowerPoint for tonight's presentation. And then at the end of the PowerPoint, if it's easier, we can go through the one-page document to see if there's any questions on the requests going in order. And then if, Mr. Chair, if you'd like that, we can just open it up to general questions after that.
Great, thank you.
All right, Doug, you want to proceed with the PowerPoint presentation?
I think that works. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Just a quick agenda for tonight. We'll be talking about state funding, which in FY23 saw a nice surprise from Marlborough. We'll be discussing the budget priorities that were derived from the strategy for improvement, as well as the budget priorities that were unforeseen needs. We'll touch on the one-time federal funds that the district has received, future catalysts that we just have to be aware of, as well as we'll be showing the new FY23 through FY26 funding projection for the school district. State funding. We all remember in FY22, the city of Marlborough was held harmless for the first time, which meant that we received the minimum aid of $30 per pupil. At that time, I predicted that we may see more hold harmless years in the future. The opposite was true. In FY23, the governor's proposed budget sees the largest year-over-year monetary increase to Marlborough in Chapter 78 history. The aid to Marlborough is increasing by 20.8%, which is just under $6.5 million. And I just wanted to touch briefly on the reasons why we're seeing that increase in FY23. So first, the foundation formula received a baseline general inflationary increase of 4.5%. We also saw the implementation of another 1/6 of the Student Opportunity Act, which targets additional funding for special education, EL students, and low-income students. At the same time, the state changed some eligibility thresholds for certain state assistance programs, and that increased the number of low-income students that we had in the district. So as you can see, the formula is formed off of a report that we sent to DESE on October 1st, and it only sees 11 additional students. But within the existing student population, we saw an increase of low-income students of 461 students over last year that were qualified as low-income. So there were more funds available for EL and low-income students, and then we saw a large increase in low-income students. Those two things combined made up about 70% of that additional $6.5 million that we received in FY23. For FY24, assuming that the eligibility threshold for state assistance programs do not change significantly, and assuming that the SOA continues to be implemented for another 1/6, and also accounting for the fact that we know today we have 270 additional students from that number that was reported to DESI on October 1st. All of those things combined should result in another bump of significance in Chapter 78 for Marlborough in FY '24. Just my projection. I don't think it's going to be another 6.5 million, potentially half of that. On the conservative side, if all of those things are not true and things do change, the worst case scenario that I see is, as long as the governor's budget is proposed, if we are held harmless again, it's important to note that this year's Chapter 78 becomes the new floor. So we would receive at least this amount plus the $30 per pupil for FY '24.
So it's important to note when we look at this slide that Mr. Diaz has up here, obviously the change of 11 students can be confusing because I just literally gave you a report and said we have 270 more. However, that was as of October 1st. After October 1st, we've seen almost a 6% growth in enrollment. That will be recorded in your FY '24 Chapter 70. So when you look at it, you're setting yourself up for potentially another large increase in Chapter 70 funding in '24, depending upon the availability of state resources. We always say that condition because it's a resource game, and they're going to choose to put their spending in the state. They may choose to put it in Chapter 70, they may put it somewhere else. So, and the other point that Doug made, which I think is it's very valid for Chapter 70, it can never go down. So the state constitution specifically protects Chapter 70 aid, and that's why there's so many districts who are in what we call, they're basically just getting the $30 per student. That's because they've traditionally received more aid than what they should be getting now. So the state, they call it hold harmless, and that's where we were last year. But now that, as Doug said, they changed, it's not that we gained more low-income students, they changed the threshold. So they allowed us to claim more low-income students on our foundation budget. That was the biggest single issue that led to our Chapter 78 going up this year. Sorry, Doug, go ahead.
Thank you. So what I like showing this chart. This is the education funding history for Marlborough. So the chart shows the foundation budget amount, which is the blue and white bar, and then the Chapter 78 amounts, which is the orange bar. And the dotted gray line is the required net school spending. That's what the state says is the minimum amount that we should be spending in education. The dark blue line, navy blue, baby black line, that is the actual net school spending for the city, which has historically significantly been over what net school spending is, the requirement amount, or around 138%, 140%. So that's something that we are proud of and also very appreciative of. So for FY '23, the total superintendent's request is $69,479,713, which is 4.24% over last year's budget. This is just a summary of the budget drivers, and then we'll go into detail on each one of them. Some of the budget drivers came straight from the strategy for improvement, including creating additional access to early education, continuing our commitment to smaller class sizes, creating a common curriculum experience across all of the elementary schools, and expanding upon the success that we've had in creating non-traditional paths for high school students. Some of the budget drivers were unforeseen expenses, such as unresolved bargaining agreements, rising enrollment of English learners, the rising enrollment of the elementary students, even higher than we predicted, and the creation of a new alumni relations initiative. So let's start with expanding access to preschool. In FY '22, the school committee successfully eliminated the preschool tuition, which was a great thing for us to do at that time. Came from the strategy for improvement. In FY '23, with the influx of Chapter 70 aid, we felt that the time was right to complete the planned expansion of the preschool program. This would create new opportunities for low-income students to attend our free preschool in Marlborough. To achieve this, we would add 3 new teachers, 3 new paraprofessionals, as well as 2 buses for a total cost of $409,191. We're also going to be working with the IT department and the facilities department to build out and outfit the new classrooms right here at the ECC with the required hardware and the furniture by utilizing FY '22 end-of-year funds.
And we do find that in discussions with Mr. Burnaby, that the buses are a very needed access point for families. A lot of families whom Mr. Burnaby's talking to, they're letting him know that unfortunately, lack of transportation is leading them to not participate in the preschool program. So we want to make sure that we don't have transportation being the sole factor where we can have additional kids access the preschool.
We're also seeking to address enrollment increases and support lower class sizes. In FY22, we repurposed 16 positions throughout the district to create 16 new classroom teacher positions. This effort was aimed at maintaining smaller class sizes at the elementary and the middle school. Despite that effort, continued increase in enrollment is putting pressure on class sizes still. Again, we've seen 270 new students since the October 1st report. When we were working on the Good Now project, some of the projections that we had predicted 2,260 K through 5 students by 2026. We're already near 2,500 students K through 5. So we're requesting in FY23 4 additional teachers at Whitcomb and 2 additional teachers at the elementary level, which would maintain the class sizes at about 20.5 at the elementary level and roughly 22 per class at Whitcomb. We're also requesting a school adjustment counselor to be shared between Goodnow and Jarrick to create a more equal distribution of caseloads and help better manage the social emotional needs of students. Altogether, that would be $487,212 in new costs.
The 4 Whitcomb teachers would be to finish the teams that we put half teachers on. So that's the half team for 7th grade and the half team for 8th grade. The 2 Good Now teachers, obviously, that's just straight enrollment increases. Right now, we're facing some pretty large class sizes, about 24 and a half in some of the grades. That will get us back down to a much more manageable size. It is obviously, and you're going to see later in the presentation where we're going to talk just for a bit about the richer SOI, but Good Now is already being stretched. And we know that, and we have to put some plans in place for the future to start to address that. I think over the next couple months, we're going to look to see if we can use some school choice opportunities or something along those lines to maybe have some kids move to a different elementary school by choice of the parents to try to relieve a little bit of that pressure on that school. And we might have to look at some other options as well. But looking at this, we really want to keep the elementary class sizes as close to 20 as possible. And we felt like by doing this, it'll get us close, but then probably next year you're going to have to be looking at another FTE, probably for the Kane School, in either 2nd or 3rd grade. And that'll keep us on that same trajectory. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. Creating common curriculum experiences. This was a position that was first asked for through the Strategy for Improvement work in FY21. The position will help better align the elementary experience across the 4 elementary schools.
We had to unfortunately reduce that request in FY21, and then in FY22 we did come in with a very conservative budget. So again, we reduced that request. But I am coming back for a 3rd time. I do think that this is important to provide the support to our elementary principals. We have a very good support system in place for our secondary principals in terms of curriculum support. We have supervisors of 3 different areas. The elementary don't really have a supervisor in that area like this. They don't have someone specifically looking at the elementary curriculum. I think this is very important to be able to make sure that we have a common curriculum experience for all the kids, is to have someone whose sole responsibility is curriculum, because the principals, while they dedicate a lot of time to it, it is something else that they're doing other than running their buildings and evaluating staff and doing everything involved with the principalship. So I do see this as a valuable investment for the district to make sure that all 4 of the elementary schools are on the same page and that we're really starting to move that forward.
Thank you. Non-traditional academic opportunities. So we have the Metas Academy, which is a night school program for overaged, undercredited EL students who are at risk of dropping out. The program currently supports 30 students, of which 12 are slated to graduate thanks to this alternative option. Through our work on the strategy for improvement, we are requesting an additional $100,000 to continue building upon the success of the current METHOS program by adding elective options, worksite visits, digital learning software, and childcare opportunities.
We can get into more, I'm sure there'll be questions, but one of the barriers that we have for several of our students is that they have infants, and that is preventing them from being able to attend school because they need to care for their children. So what we're looking to do is potentially explore the opportunity where we can provide childcare on a limited basis for some of our students, especially in the night program, so that way they can finish their high school diploma and get that done, although they've had a life event of having a child.
We're also earmarking some funds in FY23 for some pending bargaining agreements.
I have no comment about this.
Rising enrollment of EL students. So the district has experienced a significant bump in enrollment of English learner students, which requires specialized staffing. EL students have grown to represent 30% of our student population, and this was 13% in FY13. We've gone from just over 600 students back in FY13 to nearly 1,500 students today. To support this rise in EL enrollment, we're requesting 2 additional teachers at a cost of $139,203. Next is a alumni relations initiative that the superintendent will be discussing. We have a handout.
Sure. As Doug's setting that out, I just want to talk for a moment about what some of the visioning we've been doing around this project. So with the mayor and with Meredith from MEDC and from Arthur Bergeron, no relation, we've been starting to talk about how can we as a school district continue to outreach to our alumni and also support the students that we have in front of us every single day and provide as much as possible for them when they're graduating. So it is uncommon in public schools to really focus on alumni relations or even have an alumni relations department or funding initiative. We think that that's going to change, and I think this is going to change across schools nationwide. Charter schools have already gotten on top of this. There are several public charter schools in Massachusetts, including the one that is in Marlborough, that already have an alumni relations department. They're already starting the work. They're already starting to develop their networks as we speak. So when I look at this opportunity, I see this as a way for us to reach out to alumni across the country in a positive way so that we can also raise funds for the students who are currently with us and will be going to college. I look at this very, very simply as seed funding for an initiative that is going to take some time and some effort. This is the very beginning of it. And I'll just be honest, part of this seed funding is absolutely 100% just to start to create the database. So we have literally more than 100 years worth of data in our records files right now, and a lot of it is not digitized. Maybe through 2001 is digitized right now. So the first thing we need to do is start to digitize that data and create the actual alumni network and the actual data behind it so we can start to track folks down. The other thing is, this is not really our wheelhouse. This isn't what we do, not what we do for work. So we would be looking to spend some funds to get a consultant to assist us on a couple places. One is going to tell us what is the most important data we need so that we can be successful in this initiative. Two, so they can help us in the future develop a job description that can meet the needs of what we're trying to do, which is frankly to raise money for scholarships for students through an alumni network. So with that work, this is the seed funding to start this initiative. This is new. This is not done in public schools for the most part. I have not found one that is doing this other than charter schools, which have very quickly jumped on this and now they are expanding. This is very common in private schools. This is very common in colleges and universities. So I think what you're looking at is we are trying to step into a unique idea. We believe that there are thousands, actually more than 10,000 graduates of MHS that are across the country, that if we simply ask the question, would you be willing to support this in the future, we think we're going to get a positive response. And we think that positive response could have a really big impact on the students we have in front of us every day today. So that's a short kind of look at what this can be. And also from my perspective, looking at this, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to also work with MEDC, because in addition to reminding them about their high school years, which they graduated from Marlborough High, it's also educating them about what's happening in Marlborough. Many of our alumni don't still live in Marlborough, they're out across the country. So I see this as very many facets, many opportunities, and a great way to involve our alumni with the schools, to reach out to them on a more consistent basis, and also to develop something that can be just really life-changing for the kids we have right now. So I know this is a very new idea, and it's probably going to take some time and effort to talk through. Not everything is going to be fully flushed out in forms. This is new. We're trying to work through it. But I think the best thing we can do is put our best foot forward, start to fund it, and see, at a minimum, can we build the database, can we build all of this and start working towards the position where eventually you could have a development officer working off that database, making connections, and working with our alumni network. So that's a shorter answer to a much larger idea.
Thank you. And as always, part of a zero-based budget is looking for opportunities to reduce some costs. So to offset the FY23 request, we are reducing $30,000 in the legal accounts, $260,000 in the out-of-district tuition costs, $9,500 in a stipend, and we're realizing $225,962,000 in savings in attrition from the retirement of some staff. Altogether, that's just about $500,000 in reduction.
So on the legal costs specifically, I know that would probably be a question. We have two legal accounts. We have a legal account for labor. We also have a legal account for student services. So it would be a reduction of $10,000 from the labor one and $20,000 from the student services one. I think if you look at our historic spending for labor, that won't be an issue. And additionally, we do think that we're probably going to wrap up every single bargaining agreement this year. So we'll have less legal costs moving into next year because of the fact that we have all of our bargaining agreements done.
Federal funding. So the district received about $11.5 million in one-time federal funds. We strongly believe that utilizing these one-time federal funds only for one-time non-recurring costs is the responsible thing to do. Deviating from this could create funding shortfalls in the future. We've been using these funds since March 2020, early in the pandemic, and they have staggered eligibility dates ending as late as September 2024. As you can see from the picture in the slide, HVAC is the largest expense for these funds. We think it's a great long-term investment for the district. Tonight, we also, I'll pass this after I'm done talking, but we wanted to share a preview of the ESSER 3 plan with the school committee. The ESSER 3 grant will come in front of the committee for formal acceptance on March 8th. And the public plan that is part of ESSER 3 is required to be posted online by March 6th. So we have a little bit of a timing issue. And that's the reason why is it has to be within 30 days of the grant being approved. So the school committee meetings dates didn't work out for us. So with your permission, we would love to post this plan publicly now. And if needed, we can make amendments to the plan. We can amend all grants. If needed, we can amend the plan after the school committee votes formally.
I do want to point out that Assistant Superintendent Murphy and Mr. Diaz applied for this in October. So there was no delay on our part. So just so you know, I just wanted to point that out. And as Doug will point out, and we pointed out several times within our budget document, we have a very strong opinion and feeling that our ESSER funds that we're getting, a lot of people calling them ESSER, some people calling them ARPA funds because of the American Rescue Act. So when you're looking at this, we have a very, very strong opinion that we should not be using those other than for one-time capital projects and expenses, so we're not creating any budget deficits moving forward. And we feel like the plan that we're going to be putting forward is very strong in that nature. We don't have any long-term deficits that are going to exist from our funding plan. We also think that the HVAC upgrades, specifically to Kane and Jarrick, are the best places to do it, due to the fact that if we do have a richer building project, let's say in the next 5 to 7 years, the likelihood is that you will be reimbursed for at least 67% of the construction project at Richer, which we were funded 66% in good now. So if you look at that, it's best to put that money, the federal money, towards Kane and Jarrick, which have a longer timeline for reconstruction, whereas Richer, you're going to get reimbursed a much more significant amount if you do it through the MSBA.
Thank you. So the handout in front of you is a summary of the stakeholder survey that the district put out, as well as a summary of the proposed budget for the ESSER 3 grant. And it meets the requirements of DESI, of the information that needs to be put out publicly. Richer Elementary. So on February 8th, the school committee voted in support of submitting the SOI for the Richer Elementary to the MSBA. The next step would be for us to go in front of the city council and get a similar support. As a reminder, submitting the SOI gets us in line for a potential project. Even if we're not approved this round, we may be considered more closely in future rounds. We think it's important for us to just show the MSBA that we're interested and get us in line, get some feedback, and improve upon the SOI if necessary.
Just as a reminder, when we did the Good Now SOI, we had started that process in 2014. So it does take a couple years to be able to move into that process. And I think it's just important, as Doug said, and I like the way he said it, you got to get in line. So when you get in line, you're at least letting the MSBA know that you have a request, you have an issue, and they can start to work with you on that. But it does take time to get to the front of the line. And from what we know, because MSBA has already been out to our building, we've already done the analysis through the last building project, the MSBA was incredibly happy with the condition of the Richer School. They said that this school should be in service for much longer than we anticipated. So because of that, you think about an emergency room model, which they operate on, we're not going to be the critical patient. And it doesn't mean that we should let the building fall apart. We should continue to take care of it, but we're going to have to get in line multiple times. That's my honest opinion. So it's going to take time for this to actually get the attention that it needs. So we should start now and continue to let the MSBA know that this is a project worthy of their consideration.
So transportation. This is something we'll be talking a little bit about in the years to come, but I just wanted to start having the conversation. In FY21, we signed a 5-year contract. We were very fortunate with some market timing at that time. We were expecting a significant bump in pricing then. Again, due to good timing and good fortune, it didn't happen. There was a delay there, but we expect that we will be seeing this catalyst in FY26. And right now, based on the rates of the districts around us, and assuming certain inflation rates for the next 4 years, we're probably looking at another $1.5 million just to continue the current level of services. So again, every year we'll be talking about this leading into FY26. Then the last slide for tonight, and I forgive me as you can't see this, it is part of your budget books. This is the new FY23 through FY26 funding projection. We did a similar funding projection last year. It was well received, so we want to continue that forward. So for FY24, we would continue working on implementing the priorities identified in the strategy for improvement, such as an ACC crossing guard, an additional elementary teacher to continue working on the small class sizes, a world language teacher at Whitcomb, and additional funds for the alternative pathways programs for high school students. We would also pursue district-wide initiatives to support at-risk students, develop clear PLC expectations, engage with the community, continue important ABAR work, and restorative justice professional development. In FY25, again, another elementary teacher and 2 interventionists at Whitcomb. And in FY26, the big catalyst of the additional transportation funds. And the next slide just has a big question mark on it with the single page, so I think open it up for questions.
So at this point, Mr. Mayor, obviously, we've presented the superintendent's budget request. We're now turning it back to the school committee, so it is now the school committee's budget, and we will make ourselves available to answer any and all questions. And if we don't have the answer tonight, we'll get the answer and we can present it at the next school committee meeting. And we would just like to entertain any questions that we have. If it makes sense, we can go through the one-page document. Doug, do you know what page that's on in the budget? I think it's page 8. And if you want to go request by request first and then to general budget questions, if that makes sense for the committee, happy to do whatever you like, Mr. Chair.
Probably a lot of crossover questions, so I know when we go in order, we always end up going back, so why don't I just open it up for questions from anyone from the committee, and then once they start in a particular area of one of the department heads getting up, then we'll stick with them for a while. We'll see who the first meeting they do. Questions for the committee?
I'll start. And we'll start with, on page 8, the expanded pre-K. I know the intent is to expedite what the original plan was. Does that address as much of a need as we've heard? Does that make sense? Like, is the enrollment out there? Or are we still waitlisting people at that point?
Sure. Why don't I ask Mr. Burnaby to come up and address that question? Thank you. So if you could just speak to the surveys you've done of parents and also what the current wait list options are and then plans for next year, I think that'd be helpful for the committee.
Sure. So for the last couple of years, we've done surveys through our work with the committee to find out what parents need in Marlborough. And overwhelmingly, the need for full day has been the response, almost 100%. Out of the last one we just did now with our current PK2 and 3 families, there was over 100 kids, over 100 families that we asked, and only 4 wanted half day for PK1. So that was pretty clear to us, the need. That does affect how many kids we can get in, because we generally had a morning and an afternoon session before, so that's kind of the negative part of it. But it is overwhelming that that's what they need. And our enrollment is we're already running out of spots. There will be a lottery. We're going to continue to take in registrations and do a wait list after the fact, but we're already going to be full the way it's set up with the new classrooms for next year.
And obviously, you know, one thing, we mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. We've done a great job of being able to remove the barriers to access. So when we look at like the universal, like we look at it and saying, well, we have universal access, if you will, and that's what we're going towards. We don't have the room for a universal preschool. We're not going to have the room. If we would need probably close to 600 seats to be able to do that. We're not going to be anywhere close to that. But we've started off, and now with this addition, we've made great strides towards being able to provide even more preschool access to children.
Yeah, we'll be able to get, with the initial plan that we've been working on, about 265 to 270 students, depending, and that might fluctuate a little bit just based on our Pathways programs, because our numbers fluctuate year to year, and we can never really tell how many kids we're going to be getting in. So that's the difference there. We have, with the 3 rooms now, capacity to get 27 students in that program. We have usually 9, no more than 9 in a room. So.
And that's giving full day?
Yeah. Some of our Pathways kids, when they start during the year, may start on a half-day schedule, so that may fluctuate too.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question to that. So, obviously, there's room for those 3 classrooms. Is there additional room for in later on years to add more, or are we at?
Right now, the
What would be
space,
the capacity?
with the 3, that's what we're looking at. There is this building's a little strange, and some of the rooms are just not all the right size for classrooms. That's really the discussion I've been having with the superintendent too. It's just, like, we have some spots, but they're not necessarily ready to be a classroom. They're not just big enough, but we could get creative and have smaller or different kinds of classrooms, which is something that the committee here at the ECC has been talking about, just to try to utilize every room and every space that we can.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, Sensei?
Thank you. So the 2 buses that are being requested, can you give me a little bit of an understanding? How would that really, I mean, are you targeting certain areas to be able to then aim to pick up? I mean, because they can't cover everywhere, so I'm just kind of curious how that's happening.
So I think one of the barriers that the preschool administration faces is sometimes they have students who want to register, but their parents cannot get them to school. So I think by adding transportation, and we'd have to probably do it on a lottery basis, because I think everybody would raise their hands.
Exactly.
I think everyone has experienced the line here, let's be honest. So I think a lot of people would want it. You might have to do it on a lottery basis. But with more students coming in, having more access to transportation is going to provide a better equitable access to the program.
Okay.
And we think a lot of times in the past, what has happened is the transportation is solely reserved only for special education students in some ways. So we want to kind of break that mold and start saying that transportation can be opened up to other families on a need basis. There's no need. We don't want folks signing up for it. We want it truly to be a need-based program.
And is it going to be a specific tier on its own, or will it fall into one of the structures that we already have?
ECC right now is a tier of its own.
Right.
It requires to have the child seats.
Right.
So to put those on and remove those in between the other routes would not be feasible. So they are their own tier.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions
Thank
on
you.
pre-K?
I do. Hildreth, we're not using that building currently.
We use it for Metis. That's the majority use for it.
Okay.
And I would tell the committee that in the future, that might be your swing space if you have a richer school project. So I would hate to expand programming there until you've finished that project.
Okay.
And then I think you definitely could look at that asset. It's a great school. We've been trying to update it with new technology. It's getting new furniture. We're trying to keep it as updated as possible. But I believe in a richer project, which if it is a renovation, you may need swing space because you're not going to have enough room on the richer lot to put modulars. So you're going to need to be very creative about that.
Any other pre-K questions? Matthew?
Thank you, Mr. Burnaby.
Great.
Who are you talking to? Oh.
Yeah. The reduction of out-of-district costs.
So Doug can speak a little bit more. There's two pieces to that. There's an actual reduction in, I think a couple of years ago, we did a presentation and showed that the residential tuitions are going to be going down. But what has also happened, which is frankly a nice thing, is our reimbursements have been rising. So for the longest time, we were calculating circuit breaker very conservatively because every year we felt like we were living on the edge in terms of like, this could be the year we get the 9C cut and we're going to be in trouble. We don't feel that for next year. So part of it is reduction, part of it is additional revenue, but I'll let Doug handle that question much better than I can.
It's very much a projection. We work together with the special education department to look at the students that are here today, project their tuition forward, but also look at the projected circuit breaker reimbursement, because we don't want to create a cliff for funding as well. But we were very comfortable reducing that $260,000 for FY23.
So just for everybody, if they don't remember Circuit Breaker is the fund that the state allows, and what they do is they take 4 times the foundation aid for the pupil, which is a little bit more than $50,000 now. Anything above that, they reimburse the district for those costs at a rate of 75%. So in the past, that rate fluctuated in times. It was 60%, it was 67%. Sometimes we got to 70%. For next year, it's funded at 75%, and we're moving forward with that. We feel stronger about that reimbursement. The other piece of it is they're starting to also reimburse us for transportation as well, which is a very nice addition, but in our somewhat conservative mindset, we frankly, when we get it, we believe it. When we finally receive it, then we say, okay, that's real. Then we can start to budget that in future years.
And we did receive our first reimbursement for transportation last year was $100,000, so it is happening, and that helped.
Ms. Hennessy,
So kind of on that same line, though, with those out-of-district tuitions, but we have the raise of the 270-some students since October. I know we had talked about the other night that a portion of that were Tier 1 and Tier 2 ELL. Do we have a portion that are in the special needs area?
Always, but I think one thing that we've done to protect ourselves against and this really is an out-of-district tuition.
Yeah.
More than it is in-district.
Right.
So one thing that we've done to protect the district financially against that is we've been carrying forward a year's worth of circuit breaker that we can tap into in the budget year. So that way we don't have to make any reductions to our operating budget. Then we have time over the year to wait to see what happens, because people move in, people move out. And some kids graduate, kids age out. So all of these things happen, and having that money in the circuit breaker account allows us to make those decisions and watch it and not have to react immediately and come to you and say, oh, we had a student move in, it's a very expensive private school, we need to reduce our operating budget, we need to lay off X amount of employees. Because we have that funding base, we don't have to make those rash decisions, and we can wait through the budget process to see how it goes. Anytime you're going to have an increase in enrollment, you have to expect that there's going to be a certain percentage of special education students.
Right.
But that's how we protect ourselves in the OOD, the other district,
Yeah.
to make sure that we don't have to make those decisions.
Yeah, if I remembered from some conversations previously, that there's that time threshold of when the out-of-district can also up their rates.
Yep.
And I just wasn't sure if that had happened or when it was happening, if that was accounting for that, so.
Yeah, I think we have a spreadsheet that is shared between Fatima West, who does all of this out-of-district charts for me, and shares that with myself and with Doug. So anytime that there is a private school that's going to look for an increase, we get a letter, and that's already calculated into the next year's projected tuition, so that has been factored in as well.
Okay, good, thank you.
any other questions on the out-of-district? Ms. Bodenhenja.
So was the transportation addition to circuit breaker part of the Student Opportunity Act?
Yes.
I thought so, yeah. And did they, why are we so, we're like, really loud. And the 75% reimbursement, was that also codified in that? Because I know it always fluctuates and they never make, no, it wasn't?
The state still makes an annual decision on the,
Oh, they do.
on the percentage.
Yeah.
We are assuming, since there's been additional funds put forth for education, that we're going to see more 75%, but that is usually one of the places that first get reduced, if there needs to
Oh,
be
I
a
see.
reduction.
Right. Do we know how many kids are turning 22 this year?
Not offhand, there aren't too many that are turning 22 from out of district. There's a handful that are seniors who are graduating. I believe right now we're at 2 students who are in residential placements overall. Those one won't drop off won't turn 22 for 2 years, and then the other one is a little bit younger.
Thank you.
Any other questions on out-of-district? Ms. Matthews.
Okay, I'm going to venture down that alumni relations person, or concept. But one question that actually involves the mayor, because it's talked about being a partnership between MEDC, the mayor's office, and MPS. So is there a vision that has been discussed, obviously, and do you have a vision, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, to fund tuition for every student that graduates from Marlborough High School.
I would love that too.
So, this came about for, after, we had several discussions and went in a couple directions, and originally it was discussed about doing the library, helping out because they're, you know, they got a long ways to go to finish their efforts. The other thing that the superintendent brought up, something that would have some immediate effect, would be to fund the SAT prep courses for everyone, you know. So that's really the path we started going down. We tied into one of the local companies, and we were excited today to hear that we're actually going to be funded from one of our companies to do that whole thing, and we'll be doing a big announcement on that in the next few days, but they'll be doing it for us. So we started going down and trying to figure out how to get all the graduates involved. I mean, I'm one that I started the city scholarship fund probably 25 years ago in the city, and it's been great. We're able to give out $5,000 a year. The problem is those kids that I gave $1,000 to 25 years ago kind of dropped off, and we haven't kind of replenished the fund with them. This is an opportunity where we're going to put this together, and we're going to tie it into 4-year increments. So maybe you can explain that, because I'll mess it all up, Mr. Superintendent. But it's for these, every 4 years, you're supporting that senior class. You know, so we have different groups supporting that senior class.
So they're tied to the fund.
And if we could get things moving, which we don't see any reason we can't, the superintendent's reached out to consultants that actually do this. The only thing he threw up in the air was no public schools are doing it, so that made me more excited, because you know I love doing things the first time. I want to be the first one over the hill. So, but it's really to go back and try to tap into all those people that are never asked. You know, I'm sure probably the majority of the people in this room give even a small check to their college. You know, even if it's not a big one, they write something every year. And we don't ask, you know, and it's an opportunity. Obviously, Arthur Bergeron loves raising money, and he picked our school system to help out and do this with. Because he was planning on, after we had a couple meetings and it didn't seem like it was moving, he was ready to jump ship on us and go do another cause that is obviously worthwhile. But we kept him on board, and he's excited to move forward with us on that. But maybe you can explain the concept.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're focused on to try to roll it out year by year is that I believe next year's freshman class is 2026, Dan? They're the group of 2026. So what we're looking to do is then, because you can't take on the whole project at once, you go back in 4-year increments. So you go back to the class of, for example, 2006. Go back to the class of 1986. Go back to the class of 1966, because those classes are 4 years removed. And then you say, this is the class that is moving forward, that is with you. This is your class.
We're adopting it.
Yeah, adopt this class, adopt these kids, and start that fundraising opportunity. And then that allows us time as well to continue to get data input, to continue to reach out, to continue to do that. So in effect, what Arthur Bergeron, not Arthur Fidget, what Arthur Bergeron had kind of put out is that you try to bond the classes. So that way there's a bond between the class of 2026, the class of 2006, the class of, and just keep going back, all the way by 4 years. So that way, as you have kids going through the system, each class is getting adopted by a former class. And that's something that we can do to relieve the burden of getting 10,000 documents into a system right away, and we can focus again on 2,500. And then we can strategically focus on the areas, and as you can see from the handout that Mr. Diaz gave you, the article from the Globe, we are in a period of time which is going to be the largest transfer of wealth in history. So I don't think it's that much to write to former classmates and say, would you consider helping students? That's it. So that's, I mean, that, when we look at what the vision can be, I think the vision could eventually be, with enough time, enough resources put into it, that every single student who graduates from MHS can get support to do what they want to do, whether it be career, whether it be college, whether it be whatever they're doing. You know, I think that's a real opportunity.
And it's really, it's probably a 2-year commitment, because it's either going to be working after 2 years, or it's not going to be working after 2 years. But we're hoping we can get this moving over the next 2 fiscal years and get some cooperation from a lot of our great graduates. So.
Yep. And the reason I'm not focusing on an FTE is because, first, I think there's operational pieces we have to focus on first. And then I think working with a company who does this professionally 100% of the time, they can help us, the district, look at what should a job description be for a development officer of a public school. How is it different than a college? How is it different than a private school? And what does that look like for us? It may not be a full-time job when you first start. It might be something that you have to build over a period of time. Those are the questions that we can work with, but we're not there yet. I think at first we have to start doing the digging and the work, building the databases, getting ready, getting a consultancy on board, so that way we can start that work and move it forward.
And just a final point, this is not to eat up and take over Marlborough Education Foundation or Citizen Scholarship Fund. It's not to take over any of those, it's to work in conjunction with them and hopefully get some more money to these guys and help the CSF also.
Thank you.
I have one additional question. So what is MEDC's role, and are they going to be supplying resources as well?
A lot of the logistics, because obviously some legal issues and accounting issues that are going to be coming up. We've been reaching out, rather than initially start our own foundation that's costly, we've reached out to a couple of the other foundations. The Metro West Foundation actually has like subgroups that they will work with, and we're hoping to work with them and actually meet with them on kind of setting that up. So they'll be putting up some resources, but again, for the city, for the school side, we needed more of a definite number as opposed to we'll just pick up whatever we need as far as the additional logistics. In the first couple of years, it's not going to be hugely expensive. You know, we're hoping to get the consultant on board. We're hoping to use students and pay them as summer help or after-school help to do the data input and to give some of these kids a project. We were talking about it earlier. You know, so the first part of the project is extremely boring. You're putting in these names and addresses and maybe some notes. But after that comes the cool, fun stuff, because we're going to go back to those original graduates, and maybe we go back to 2020 and find out, all right, no one's from born in that year is still with us, and move forward. Now we're going to send these kids out there to try to find these old graduates and work our way up. So I think that's where they kind of get into it, whether it's, you know, through the newspapers or through, you know, the newer ones we'll find on Facebook, but I think they could have some fun with it.
I think it would be like the coolest after-school job that ever existed once you get past the data entry part. The data entry part would be kind of boring, but actually then trying to work to find all these graduates across the country, I think would be a really incredible project. And then the other thing that benefits us is that we also then can provide to all of the alumni groups for the classes updated information on alumni for them as well. Because
But you have to make an announcement at the event that, you know, we want a couple dollars if you can write a check. Other questions on that? Next, do you have another one? Or, oh, Mrs. Tennessee.
How
So, kind of out of order, but on my list was not for this year, but for next year, your future list. So I'll ask, because I think from a trajectory, we need to understand, there was a listing about the world language teacher.
Sure. Principal House, you want to come up and talk about your enrollments? Thank you.
Hello. So as the projection showed, our enrollment is growing on a daily basis at Whitcomb, and our student body is growing in terms of their ability to take world language. And so looking down the road, we want to ensure that our students have every opportunity available to them to join a world language. And right now, with 2 world language teachers, keeping our class sizes around 25, we could be reaching more students with a 3rd teacher aboard and having an additional 125 students in 7th and 8th grade take world language.
Okay, so I guess I'm asking it more because we had reduced previously because we were heading towards intervention. So is our data showing changes, improvements on intervention techniques so that we think projection-wise we can focus more on world language then?
By the year that it's due, we will have those 125 students between 7th and 8th grade ready based on map data to go into a world language option.
Okay, all right. And we sticking with the world languages that we have in place currently?
I think that's a future discussion.
Okay.
I don't want to jump, I have to respect the fact that I'm not going to be here on July 1st. So I think it's a future discussion.
Throw that on.
Presumably.
There we go.
Stop saying that.
You didn't see the ball and chain around your ankle, did you? All right.
Are there any more questions on that subject?
Does anybody have any questions about the 4 additional Whitcomb teachers that we're asking for in the budget?
That completes the team, right? That was the whole.
At all 3 grade levels, yep.
So that also very nicely, if you look at some of the projections we've done for the next 5 years, I think you can honestly expect between 360 and 390 students at Whitcomb in any given year. So by adding those additional teams, that really solidifies your ability to have very good class sizes across Whitcomb.
100 kids per team.
Yeah, and I think that's important because that sets you up for the future where you know, even as this enrollment has grown, that you're prepared all the way through K through 12, and that you have good class sizes all the way through there. You know, we don't ever talk about Mr. Riley's class size, but he has good class size too. Dr. Riley, sorry.
And in addition to the core classes, those 4 teams at every grade level also start to impact our non-core
That's
or
what I
our
was just
elective
gonna-
options, and really start to focus on those class sizes. They've ranged anywhere from 23 to 33 in our elective courses, and 4 teams on a quarterly basis start to give them the same classroom experience as they get in their core classes.
Any other questions on, go ahead.
Okay, so you just went down that path where I was interested in, like, how are we on those class sizes though for like the music program, and how we kind of changed up how we were delivering the curriculum on non-core, like our numbers looking that they would be pretty good?
Yeah, making progress. The 4th team at every grade level will ensure that when they're in their non-core or specials electives
Whatever.
courses, that they're seeing same class sizes or there to equal of their math colleagues, their social studies classes, their ELA classes.
And we aren't in a position though of needing to have any additional teachers to help to make sure those class sizes are then,
Not at this time.
okay, all right.
Any other questions? Oh, Ms. Bowden-Henry.
I have a question, but I don't know who it goes to because I don't know what the, in the reduction, the stipend, the repurposed stipend, what is that?
We had by mistakenly put a stipend in the budget for, we doubled the webmaster stipend by mistake last year.
Oh.
So we can reduce one.
Oh, okay. So I guess it's not at the middle school, so that's okay. That was my question. I didn't know who it was.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tennessee.
Sure. So you brought up about the director of elementary curriculum that, you know, we talked about a while ago and then reduced it on out. Timing is right at this point to try and bring that in. And funding seems like it's in line that we can go ahead and bring that in at this point.
Yeah, the previous 3 years, we had requested it, but back in FY '21, we had to reduce our budget to go to city council, and that was one of the reductions we made. And then last year, if you remember, we did a zero.
Yeah.
So we didn't really have any requests at all. My biggest request on this one is just the amount of time and necessary effort it takes to make sure that we're doing the right things and we're having a common curriculum experience. Putting that on top of the elementary principals and the assistant principals with their other duties is very difficult. And I look at the system and the supports and structure we have at the secondary level with having supervisors of content areas that can really support the principal's vision. We don't have any of that duplicated really at the elementary level. Now, we have done some good work on that, but we've done it in some other areas. So for example, we have supervisors for music, for health and wellness, for the visual arts. We have all those in place, and those are K through 12, but we don't have anyone specifically 100% looking at our elementary curriculum every day. And frankly, helping our principals get to the place they want to be. You know, the principals have a lot of stressors on them, and running the buildings, it's not always easy for them to be in the classrooms as much as they'd like to. It's also not as easy for them to be at PLC meetings all the time. It's not easy for them to work with a group of teachers to write curriculum. If we have someone in that place, they can do that. And then there's other ancillary benefits that we can get as well, which is also reducing the evaluation caseload of all the principals and assistant principals, because you can spread some of the evaluations to the director position. Additionally, that person can take on more responsibility for some of the grants that we have in the district, which also should free up time for our assistant superintendents as well, for them to focus more on some big picture issues. So I know I've asked for it multiple times, and I've also cut it multiple times, but at this point, I believe that that is the best path forward, that we can start to provide that support at the elementary level, which we have enjoyed at the secondary level.
Do you also feel like that person would help to make sure that from an assessment standpoint, we're very consistent across the elementary area? I mean, Mary, I know we've had discussions about different assessments have popped up at other schools, stronger used here and there.
We do have a district assessment calendar,
Right.
and I think that the elementary principals have been really committed to that consistency across the district. I think that one of the things that the building principals are always going to be the instructional leaders. And one of the easiest way to see it this year is we have those early release days, and each of the principals and assistant principals have been meeting with grade levels in each of those those early release. The elementary curriculum coordinator would also develop the plan to make sure there's consistency across all of those meetings, so that it helps support with some of the difficult conversations as we talk and look at curriculum, as we examine the curriculum and common experiences across.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions on the coordinator? No? Keep going. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's just a quick one. Is that just the salary number?
Projected salary.
Okay.
It would have to be negotiated on an individual contract.
Okay, thank you.
And Martha,
Go ahead.
follow up too, thank you. So, you know, adding on the A-bar work that we're doing around curriculum, you know, it is a lot, and I understand that the principals are the educational leaders in your buildings, but to then put on them to be coordinating with each other to make sure everybody's doing the same thing seems crazy. So, I mean, I think I'm supportive of this, and all the extra stuff that we're trying to add to curriculum or subtract from curriculum or whatever. Having one person with eyes on all of it makes a lot of sense to me.
And I appreciate the work that our principals have done, because they have taken the time to meet together
Yeah.
on they meet a lot. I don't want to say a weekly basis, because sometimes it's more than a weekly basis. They put the time and effort in to be together and be decision makers together. This I see as a support that can help it grow even further, because there's some stuff they just can't get to, and it's probably very frustrating. But someone else could get to it, could help with it, and give all the information, and I think they could really boost up their work.
Yeah, and in, along that lines, and not to be adding more on people's places, but I can't remember where it was. I think it was in the, just reading back through the, what's it called? These blue pages. The strategy for improvement, thank you. Adding that curriculum-based SEL piece that we hope to be adding eventually. I see that being a big part of how do we do that, how does everybody do it. And I know that if we hire a person to oversee that work at some point, to do K-12 is going to be a real challenge. So, yep, thanks. You have more on your list? Keep going. I'll be happy to piggyback.
So, the childcare for the evening programs, would that be something that you feel like we might be able to utilize some of our own students and really kind of give them also opportunities?
So whenever we talk about infant care, we have to be cognizant of the early childhood rules and regulations around childcare, and there's a lot of regulations around that. So it may not be something that students can do, it may be something that they can witness, help with, watch, maybe be an intern or somehow be involved. But we're probably talking about a situation that it has to be a licensed person due to the nature, liability, and regulations that surround it. We have several students where this is a need, and this is the barrier for them to get their high school degree finished. So I think when we look at it, it would probably be something where we're going to need to invest either with a contractor or potentially build it ourselves. The licensing matters though in this one. You guys, everyone remembers that we did our own daycare when the pandemic hit. But part of the reason we were able to do that so quickly is because they basically relinquished a lot of the rules around that. So we were working with Boys and Girls Club to get up to speed, and Jeff and Nikki did a great job. They actually did all of their trainings required to be the managers on site to do that. The licensing for infant care is significantly more. So when we look at that, it's probably a bigger project than I can explain right now, but it might be something that for the night school option could potentially get a handful of students through their high school experience with the life event they've had.
Okay.
Continuing on that, could you expound a bit more on the entire, that entire program, what the $100,000 increases?
Sure, I'll invite Dr. Riley up and also Ms. Medallion, if you don't mind, coming up as well. Uh-oh, I ran out of seats. I'm sorry. Well, you're going to come up second.
Bring it up. Look me. Come on up.
Dan, don't hit Amy with the chair.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. So to speak a little bit to the night school proposal for $100,000, just to kind of separate out the strategic planning that's happening right now in parallel with the budget proposal. So a lot of the allocation of that money is specifically for the enhancement of programming in order to provide more students with that night school option. As of right now, we're doing it for the Matus Academy, which is our EL 1s and 2s. And we want to go beyond that and start to provide additional opportunities for higher level ELs as well as non-ELs. Sorry, my mask is constricting me a little bit. as well as non-ELs, with a good portion of that funding. And so I'll also ask Ms. Medallion to speak to the strategic planning committee's ideas that are listed out in that document as well.
Well, I need to also correct Mr. Diaz, because with the November MCAS retest, we have another student who looks like they will be up for graduation. So it's very exciting.
Yes, we're up to 15 now?
Well, we're going to go with a 13 for the moment with a possible 2 more.
Yep.
So it's all, making sure it's all good. So yes, the committee that met talked a lot about trying to find, thank you very much, trying to make sure that we're not missing some group or some part of our student body that has a need that we're not able to meet. And one of the things we realized is the MATES with the overage unaccredited was this nice, tidy group that we were able to identify very easily. And then it got very messy when we tried to recreate it. But really, the group that is on the budget as part of that money is exactly what we did for MATES going back from 2017, I believe, starting that work. And one thing that we realized is we want to have a group really look at our systems in place of even tracking the students we lose. We don't have good systems yet, and really, we do in pockets, right? But we're not able to say where our students and why they might have chosen otherwise. So we want to give that the time and necessary to really find how to help our changing student body. And so that is a big part of it.
Dan, to specifically answer your question, if you go to page 28 in the budget book, I'll give everyone a moment just to get there. If you go to page 28, there is a resources needed for implementation, and it talks about some of the areas in which we're looking for funding, and one of them is to start to expand on the electives for MATES. So right now, the students go to school on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights, and they have, I don't want to say a strict schedule, but we proposed it in nature to focus on the areas they need to test, because the test itself is the comprehensive decision that allows us to graduate them. So that the state has agreed to give us this ability to give diplomas to students if they pass the MCAS. So really, the Tuesday and Thursday nights are very focused in these areas. They're going to have ELD, they're going to have math, they're going to have science, not a whole lot more. They might have some ELA classes depending on where they are, but to be honest with you, they're very tight in that. So what we're looking to do is potentially get more electives for the students, so that way there's more of a draw to come to school, because with more interest in there. We also think it's just the right thing to do. So we've started this program, we've started to have success with it. Now we really want to see how can we continue to boost it, how can we continue to make it better and get better outcomes for the students. So that's one piece of it. We talked about the potential funding for childcare. There's digital learning suites that we can set kids up in. The one that was requested was Apex. I haven't dealt with it myself, but I've heard very good things. Part of it is also to fund some worksite visits. I think that's very important, because we want to get our students, especially a lot of the students that are in MATES, some of them are EL level 1s and 2s. That's a majority of the students. Some of them might be newcomers. We want to get them out in the community, want them to visit work sites, start to make connections, because a lot of the kids are working full-time and going to school. It's a very tough lift for them. So we want to be able to get as many connections for them as possible. So when you look at that whole package, that's to take that whole package in. And then I think what Dan's talking about, so I don't want to put words in Dr. Riley's mouth, but I think what Dan's talking about is this is one group of students. We have other students who are dropping out. So are there other things we can do to re-engage other students? What does that look like? How do we start to plan for that for the future? Sorry if that was long-winded.
That's good.
Any other questions on the program?
Thank you both.
There. Expanded electives was brought up in the budget.
Through the MATES program?
No, was it high school opportunities expanded? Was it just make this, or
I
was
think
it?
it was for 24.
To meet this.
Was, yeah, okay.
We are continuing to look at what electives we're offering across departments though each year, and I will be doing a fantastic program of studies presentation for you after you get through the budgeting process and sharing some really exciting news with you about some of the new things we're planning to offer. Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else for Dr. Riley?
Hennessy, anything for Riley?
I'm looking, sorry.
Okay.
Gotta go down my list. I think I'm good.
Okay, I
Thank
come
you.
back up if you need me to. too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're on a roll, Hennessy. What's next?
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, this is moving forward, but I've got to ask, since it's on there, the crossing guard? Just,
Yeah, that's,
sorry, but like, I know it's down the road, but I'm just
Okay.
curious.
literally the mayor just walked out of the room, but
Let's wait till
I would say
Oh.
it's probably a bigger discussion. I think that we're trying to work collaboratively with Chief Georgie because we just can't get crossing guards. And there might be a potential for the school district to be a partner in this because in some ways you can deputize a crossing guard. So we might have some folks who want to do some extra hours. We might be able to post for some extra hours for folks to do some of those roles if they have the proper training from the police department. So that's a bigger discussion.
That's really him.
Yeah. We might need the mayor to weigh in on that one too.
Okay, well, she put me on the spot. I was going down my list.
But that specific request on there is to potentially look at, I believe, Mr. Burnaby, is this to look at Bolton Street, correct? Yeah, to look at Bolton Street, now that we have the parking lot across the street.
Yeah.
We do have some need there. It can be tough crossing that street.
Oh, yeah.
People drive, a little fast sometimes.
You mean the ones that like pass buses and things like that? Yeah, it's an issue, so.
So, Mr. Mayor, I let the committee know that we're exploring opportunities for us to partner with the police department and that we might taking on some of the crossing guard duties because of it's very difficult right now for the police department to retain crossing guards, and we may have current employees in the school department who can, I was joking about the deputized part, but that can get training from the police officers to be able to fulfill that role for us in certain sections of the city.
They can have tasers, they can't have guns.
Tasers, wow.
But one of the issues we have from a police standpoint is it's right at shift change. So we start getting into contract issues and paying for 4 hours and all that good stuff, so. But I'm sure it'll work out. Other questions?
Go ahead, Michelle.
I have just little random questions, is CPAC back on track?
We still have a waiver where we're doing parent workshops, and currently we still don't have an active CPAC, so we'll be continuing to reach out to families.
And how long do the waivers last for?
So it's for 3 years. This is the last year, and then we can renew it.
But we have an LPAC?
We have an LPAC, however, we have not met since the pandemic, so we need to do the same thing and reinvigorate our families, but they have been reaching out, so that's a positive sign.
Thank you. Could we, at future meetings, unrelated necessarily to the budget, but kind of get an update on how much progress we're making towards our FY22 goals in the strategy for improvement? That would be helpful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I was reading through some of this, and this is a great document. I forgot how great it was. It's nice to be able to reread it in conjunction with the budget stuff.
So we just updated that. So we had 4 administrative dinner meetings this year, which we had our last one, I believe, on January 17th. And all 4 meetings were to update the strategy for improvement to be ready in time for budget so we could deliver it to the school committee.
Thank you, everyone. This was really great. The technology capital plan?
Yes.
What's the rotation for the devices? Is it 4 years, 5 years?
I call it Mr. Platty if he's,
He's there, I see him.
come on up, Mr. Platty. And Tom, would you mind just talking about the rotation for Chromebooks, laptops, and all of the equipment?
Sure. The rotation for Chromebooks is 4 years. Rotation for laptops is 4 years also. iPads, we're trying to keep around 5 years. We're moving in terms of, you saw the smart panels are going into the elementary schools. No longer can you purchase projectors that are with bulbs. You can purchase laser projectors, which are expensive, but the panels we're buying will have a life expectancy of 7 to 10 years.
So they don't use those crazy expensive bulbs
No.
anymore. Well, that's good.
Epson, the largest dealer, doesn't sell regular projectors anymore in terms of regular bulbs. They sell what they call laser projectors, which the panels are much more effective.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I just was reading through it and had that thought.
Does anybody have any other questions on the technology capital plan?
That's good.
Thank you, Mr. Platty, for your work.
Thank you, thank you. Can you walk on the ESSER 3 funds and the projected expenditures? I know we talked a lot about not doing salaries because what happens once the money's gone? And I know some of the stuff, like credit recovery, that kind of stuff, hopefully is a short-term need. But can you just, like intervention, support staff, are those all really positions that are specific to the next year or two, and then we are not going to need them anymore?
Can you just do me a favor, just tell me what page you're on?
I'm
so that I
sorry,
can be on this.
16.
Does this override what's really on 16 now?
Budgets are the same.
What'd you say?
The budgets are the same. So
They're the same.
No, but this is the breakdown,
that has additional
the supporting documentation that you ate.
Oh, okay, so I could just read this and get my answer probably.
The handout has more information. What we will say is that when we did go through this, you will see salaries, but they were for one-time positions. So we did increase, as an example, we did increase the number of LPNs we had in the district for a period of time.
Yeah.
But going into next year, we're going to have 3 LPNs, which we had pre-pandemic. So when you look at some of those salaries, for example, interventions are paid on an hourly basis to existing employees, for the most part. Sometimes we do stipends. So when you look at the salary buckets, there's very few areas where there's any carryover. I don't know if Mary or Jody, if you want to jump in too, but you might have a better answer.
Yeah, so the salaries in ESSER 1 and 2 are true salaries. In ESSER 3, those are stipends.
Okay.
Okay, so they are stipends for before-school interventions, after-school interventions, the ability to offer summer interventions at the high school are a lot of the things that cannot be funded by Title I, so we can offer additional support. So that's why the high school has interventions happening before school and after school. That was the intent of that. Also SEL interventions, so being able to have some more social and emotional groups offer, which is not the academic support, but other types of supports. With that amount is in there so that we can offer it for multiple years and hopefully address any gaps and any additional supports that need to be in place the next couple of years. And also some stipends because we are going all in with the restorative justice, restorative practices. So those are stipends because staff are staying 4 late nights to do each cycle, and then hopefully during the summer. So there's a lot of, this is all in for us, And then we're trying to commit so that any student that needs to take classes during the summer for credit recovery, that is district funded, so that that's not a barrier to any of those students towards graduation. And I think that other pieces of it are a little bit easier.
And then, in addition, the salaries for the school adjustment, 2 school adjustment counselors, if you recall, we have one of the positions at Richer School and one at Goodnow are currently grant funded. Originally, it was just for this current school year. However, we had received some additional special education grant funding, so this year is funded by that grant, and then next year is funded by the ESSER grant. So the year after, which is the FY '24 budget, the expectation is, the original plan was to reallocate school adjustment counselor from Whitcomb and a school adjustment counselor from the high school down to those 2 positions. Currently, there are 5 school adjustment counselors at, 4 adjustment counselors at Whitcomb, 5 at the high school, plus each of them have a clinical position for the Bright grant for the Bridge and the Transitions programs.
And can I just ask a question to make sure? When I was reading through Munis, it looked like what you were just talking to, the before and after school, that's where there were definitely big pockets of money where we were hitting up, and that's all where that money is, not all, but like a portion of that is hitting those programs.
We want to support that for as long as possible, and
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So we allocated a significant amount of money there.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Caruso?
Could you explain a little bit better the labor management cost in ESSER 3? So it's related labor management costs? COVID-related.
Oh, the 550.
In that same grid,
We have outstanding bargaining obligations. I don't know how else to say that. It would give away our bargaining position.
Okay, but it's COVID, things happen because of COVID.
We're allowed to use
Gotcha.
the funds to do that.
I got you.
Sorry, it's as good as I can say it.
That's fine, no, I understood. I know labor management.
Question?
can I,
Go ahead, Jim.
I know this is out there, but in terms of transportation, knowing how much of a bump it's going to be at some point, is there a sweet spot at which point you actually consider getting your own buses?
No.
So I know that there are some districts that use their ESSER money to start their own in-house transportation company. They used our HVAC systems to buy buses. I mean, I know it's a crazy thought.
No, it's not.
We're not in the business
It's
of
not crazy.
transportation, but
There are districts that are absolutely doing that. You're 100% correct, because they want to control their costs over time. Doug and I actually talked about this a lot. We went through this in a lot of detail, and part of the issue is the ongoing capital cost has to be satisfied to be able to run the program. And then you also have to have a whole operation outside of which we normally operate. So you're gonna have to have a bus depot, you're gonna have to have a place to park the buses that's safe, you're gonna have to have mechanics. All of that is something that, it's not in our wheelhouse. Like, we don't really have that operation. However, I will agree with you, because I have worked in districts in the past that have owned, operated their own buses, and there is savings when you can control some of those costs. The hard part comes in what we're dealing with right now, is just not being able to get as many people employed as we want. And that's really part of the struggle. So it is tough, but it is absolutely something that, frankly, Doug and I talked about for hours and tried to really dig into and say, is this a worthwhile expense? Should we start doing it 2 buses a year, 3 buses a year, just to start chipping away at it? But I think you have to really dedicate, and you have to have a lot of space, you have to have all the people, and that's very difficult. And the ongoing capital cost would be something that we'd have to be going back to the city with on a pretty regular basis, because we run, I think, close to 50 pieces of equipment, Doug. Is that right? Yeah, so it'd be 50 pieces of equipment, and that's, the initial buy is several $1 million.
Yeah.
Great.
You could be the first one over the hill.
He hasn't even mentioned retirement or OPEB or anything else yet. Next. Who's up? Who's Tennessee?
God, I'm like, if they're hitting me,
So
then,
we're done?
okay, so,
Getting there.
help me a little bit on reviewing some of Munis.
Yeah.
And it's not like it was only in one specific area, but it looked like we had some costs that were hitting, like overtime, or we had vacant positions, so we were trying to fill with like long-term subs or something like that, which were bumping up line items. And then it looked like we were adjusting in the future to account for some of these positions that are really hard to get filled, to make sure that we had the money in there to do that. Was I reading that incorrectly, or?
We budget salary lines zero-based. So it's the staff that we anticipate being in that line. We forecast the actual salaries, or we forecast what we would hire somebody at. Is there a specific page? On the top right, there's a P and a number.
Yeah,
If you give me
I mean.
that page number, I can.
Well, okay, that's not the best example, but there was, and it's not this alone, but I'll give it to you so you can look at it. P35, down at the bottom, there was a 26%, 26.5% jump up on that, and that's where I'm trying to understand there, and it's not really just that specific one. There were a number of different lines. There was actually with like some clerk lines where it looked like there was like overtime situations accounted for and things like that.
The ELO, so again, the salary lines are based on actual expected expenses. We don't account for any potential long-term substitutes. So that particular instance in which you are referring to on page 35 at the bottom,
Yeah.
26% bump at the richer ELL line, or English language learner line, is that one of the new FTEs that we're proposing on this
Was
budget
at a higher rate.
is earmarked for this line.
Yeah.
So that you're seeing that vacancy, so you could flip for the next page.
Yeah.
There's a TBD vacant position.
Exactly.
That is the reason why.
Okay,
yes.
that's what I was reading, and it was in a number of different spots, but I wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly.
Yes, the
Making
new
the rate-
FTEs that we're requesting on this budget has been plugged into the anticipated
Yeah.
account, so they'll be in.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Anyone have another question? Anyone have another question?
Well, I don't have a question.
Ryan.
Oh, boy, it's loud. Not a question, but just more of a thank you. I thought the presentation and the outline of the budget book was very well formatted, and I found it very easy to, all my questions were kind of answered through reading through the document. I appreciate everybody's questions tonight, though. It was very, very thorough. But just wanted to thank you for providing the information that you did.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diaz, did a great job with this one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Team effort.
Can I ask another?
Of course.
Sorry, I agree with her wholeheartedly, but on page P80, kind of near the back, and I think this is the after hours, so this might be hitting maybe some of the METIS program. I'm trying to understand there's the evening program, and so I think that
METIS?
is.
Yes.
Okay,
And that includes the new requests as well that were in the budget.
okay.
The delta here is the new $100,000 being requested on the
That's
budget.
what I thought. I just, again, I want to make sure that I was reading it in the right pockets, because like, the alumni relations was also underneath where the communications, so again, I was trying to understand
Once,
where it was falling.
once we fully hash that out, I might have to create a new account for it based on DESI requirements. But
Yeah.
for now, I needed to put it somewhere. So it was, this communications liaison and the community initiative, so I figured they could go in together for now. But we may need to create a new account for that once we hash it all out.
Gotcha. Just was trying to follow your
No, I
your
appreciate
thought
that. Thank you.
process. And software, wow, we were getting, that's a huge wallop too. On P88, on new licenses and things like that.
Yes, we saw some additional, again, with the pandemic, we were able to learn some great new softwares, and Mr. Plaggy came into my office and did a great petition for some additional costs. I think the Google Enterprise was the new addition on this line.
What, sorry, I'd love to understand, what is that?
Up until about 2 years ago, the use of the Google platform was free to schools. And they have a lot of different things in it. We use Google Classroom as a method of all the kids grades 3 and above communicating. Well, 2 years ago, Google came out with a new business plan. And they said we only, for the free version, we'll just have very few, some features. But if you really want the features you need to have for a school system, it's going to cost $26,400 a year. And that's what it is, and that's what you had to go with. And so the increased cost for that, and also our other platform, Seesaw, is based upon the fact that that's the basic learning platform for the kids, and the total increase because of that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That jumped up a lot.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
I
Any
want
other
to
questions?
I just want to add, along the lines of the software and the computer stuff, Heidi and I had the opportunity to go to the Kane PTO meeting last night, and I made a comment that I've been thinking about a lot, is that, now pretty soon we're going to lose the masks and everything's going to go back to normal. But I have no intention of having things go back to what it was pre-pandemic, because I feel like we've learned, at least in the realm of software, computer, we had a one-to-one district before, but I'm guessing a third of those devices were being used as expensive paperweights. And we've, our faculty and you guys have gained so many skills around this stuff that I'm excited to, get back to no masks and some semblance of normalcy, but to take that stuff that we've learned and run with it. So,
Not me,
just
I
a
wanna keep
couple.
it on forever.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Other questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
May I entertain a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, we gotta approve it first. Okay.
No,
Oh,
we're not
we gotta go
voting.
back to that
No, we're not
stupid-
voting.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much.